We all know that family law cases can be complicated, which is why you and your client deserve reliable, hassle-free drug and alcohol testing services. From hair testing to abstinence monitoring, we can help. Visit lextalks.co.uk for more information.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Family Lawyer podcast. Today I have Sally Robinson, a partner and head of the HCR Law Family Team in Central England, based at Northampton office, you were saying, Sally. And the topic of conversation today is the evolving nature of language in family law. There are some projects already going on around how we can change some of the language of family law, things like the Pathfinder project, which has put children very much at the centre of that programme as well. So looking forward to a really interesting discussion on how you see this language of the law evolving, Sally. In the first instance, though, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice, please.
I can. I've been practicing family law now for almost 22 years. I'm based in Northampton, as you've said, and I cover mostly the Central England region. I'm a member of Resolution, have been since qualifying in 2003, and I'm one of the few lawyers in my region that offer the one couple, one lawyer service as well.
And quite interesting in the context of a recent announcement from the Manchester City manager, who said that he is going to be using one lawyer, one couple for his own divorce, Pep Guardiola, of course.
He did. It's a service that is really valuable to some people. It's not for everybody, but certainly those people that would like to sort out their issues when separating amicably, and they're able to do that together. It's proving really useful, and it's actually really refreshing as a family lawyer to have two people sitting in front of you rather than one. So yeah, it's really positive.
Well, as I say, topic of conversation today are really that changing nature of the language of family law, and we can use one couple, one lawyer as a great example of that, but really all brought about by, I guess, a changing landscape of the law as well. We're 3 years on from no fault divorce. I mean, can we still under or overstate the impact of that on the sector?
I don't think we can. I think, or certainly since I've qualified, it's probably the biggest landscape change in the family law arena, and I think it has been absolutely fundamental in the drive to move forward in terms of using better language, less adversarial, which is where really family law language has derived from, and that's the sort of difficulties that we've had over the years as family lawyers, that language used is often divisive. Certainly there's evidence out there that shows the type of language you use can have a massive impact on how settlements are reached between parties. So it's so important. So I think this growing or turning of the tide, it's so important and significant. And I think no fault divorce, as you've said, is fundamental. And there is also a growing body of evidence off the back of that that shows that the risk to children from parental conflict is immense. And actually how you use language can really turn the heat up or down on that. So I think as lawyers, we've got a real duty to think about that a lot more and use it as an opportunity to reassess the language that we use around family separation.
Now that's an interesting point, and perhaps a controversial one, because do you as a professional, as somebody who, as you say, been practicing for 20 years, do you see that the community is adopting this change in language, this change in tone?
Some, not all. I mean, things are very different to how I was taught. When I was training, we were first and foremost taught to be lawyers, and there was less emphasis perhaps on what people would call soft skills. which actually, as family lawyers, it's really important that you have all of those skills as well. And that comes back to the use of the language that we use in correspondence, how we speak to our clients, how we speak to other solicitors. And I would say it is growing in terms of the amount of lawyers that are making that change. You've still got old school lawyers out there that perhaps write correspondence in the way I was taught in the early noughties. It's something I've had to change myself. So I had to consciously change. It was a few years ago. So for example, in letters, when I'm writing to other solicitors, I would have traditionally said your client, my client. Now I use first names. It's about making it a lot more personal, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with families that are probably going through the worst time of their life, and they're people and they have feelings, and we need to refer to them as such.
That's a really important point, actually, and not one that I'd particularly thought of in terms of some of the practicalities of language. We can talk quite ethereally about, oh, we need to change this or change that about language, but what have you done in your own practice practically to change how you behave? You've talked about adapting your own behaviours from when you first qualified through to now.
Yeah, and I think most of it is around that really, and changing sort of precedent documents that we have from a practical point of view. But it did take some time actually for me to get into the habit of using first names, for example, because I would be able to dictate off a letter pretty quickly in the way that I'd always done. But it has taken thought, and that may sound really silly, just to use first names, but it's just changing how we as lawyers have been taught, really. I suspect it's probably different perhaps for the younger generation coming through. I would have thought they're perhaps being taught differently to how we were. Hopefully that sort of adversarial language that was certainly dominant when I was training is starting to be used a lot less than previously.
You're based in Northampton. HCR Law have got a London office. As an outsider looking in, I get the impression that there's still a bit of a disconnect between what happened in the city and perhaps what happened in the provinces. Is that right, or am I misreading that?
Do you know what? It's difficult to know, and I can only sort of talk from personal experience, and certainly other solicitors that I've come across that may be based in London, and talking about my own London team, I haven't seen a huge difference, in all honesty. I haven't really noticed any sort of stark contrasts in attitudes that's perhaps worthy of discussion, really, as such.
But it is influenced by this changing demographic. So we've got a lot of young talent, particularly coming into family. And as you say, you are now the role models. You're now the trainers as opposed to the ones that are being trained. And your attitudes are changing, and therefore that is impacting the next generation of professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I think, lawyers coming through now certainly are being taught those other additional skills that we perhaps didn't have the luxury of being trained in. It's certainly something that has come more through experience and practice. I mean, certainly this, the younger lawyers coming through now, they wouldn't have used terms like custody, access, which would have been the norm, certainly when I was training. And it's that sort of language that I think really has got to be changed as examples. So yeah, I think it is changing, and it will continue to change.
This is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Because if we kind of keep talking about it, and organizations like Resolution are doing a great job of really getting their members on board with this as well, the more we kind of talk about it, the more we kind of raise the profile of it, the more likely it is that we're actually going to make some progress on this.
Yeah, and I think, Resolution, for as long as I can remember, have always advocated for using language that's not inflammatory. It's part of their code of practice. It's about reducing and managing conflict. And again, I think it's all these different things that are going on that are now building up to now actually have some impact. I think at this point, it's also really important to mention a paper that was published recently in October 2022 by the Family Solutions Group, Language Matters, which was commissioned by Sir Andrew McFarlane. It was really done to look at the use of language in the family law arena, what changes we can make. And I think what's evident from that is that there isn't only one change. There's changes that need to be made everywhere, and that can be from educating the public, from the court, the guidance they issue, the court forms they use, and I think also to changing the perception to perhaps what a good family lawyer looks like. Again, in the old days, perhaps clients would be looking for a lawyer who might describe themselves as a robust advocate or somebody that can fight your corner, when in reality a better family lawyer might be the one that most of their cases are kept out of the court arena because they're helping people to settle. And surely that's got to be better for families if they can do that without all of the acrimony and the stress and the cost of having to go through court proceedings.
I agree. There's a massive education piece here, as ever with the law, and this is a topic that I come back to time and time again through the podcasts, where we talk about what we can do as an industry and what we can do as a profession, and then how that then influences the public perception of the law as well. And that's really, really important. I mean, you've got popular television portraying particularly family lawyers as potentially quite demonstrative and as you say, really sort of combative. And that sets expectations, doesn't it?
And the thing is, it's never going to be perfect, because if you've got somebody that's coming in to instruct you because they've gone through a particularly awful time with their former partner, they may not want you to use nice constructive language that's going to help. They might want to come in all guns blazing, and they might want that more aggressive lawyer because they feel that it's some way of making them feel better about the situation. So it's not going to be for everybody, but I think we've really got to work together to make that effort, and as you say, to show people that actually there is a better way than going into court and I put my inverted commas battling, because it's just it's not nice, and it's certainly not good for the children, as we've already said.
Well, here's a loaded question then, Sally. Can the lawyer be both? Can they do the combative stuff and do the cases where, as you say, somebody's perhaps not wanting that conciliatory approach, and be the collaborative lawyer that perhaps we've described here?
I think it is possible to have two hats. I think you tend to find those lawyers that perhaps are also mediators or are some other specialist in the ADR arena. Usually you'll find that they are more conciliatory generally. So when you've perhaps got them acting for the other party on your matter, you do generally know the ones that perhaps aren't like that. But yeah, it is certainly possible to wear both hats. But I think, it's still about trying to educate our clients. And even if we have got somebody that wants to instruct you, that wants you in terms of being aggressive or not to have that conciliatory approach, I think it's important that we still bring that back to our clients and talk to them about it and explain the reasons why, in the hope that they'll take it on board. They don't always, but we can but try.
But this feels like the elephant in the room though, Sally, because divorce inevitably is confrontational. I don't think we will ever get away from that. As I know you say you get sort of, it's nice to have both parties in the room with you, but I don't know, there's an emotional charge to this that I don't know, is this a utopia?
The thing is, divorce is never going to be easy, even if you've got both people that they agree to it and that they feel that the best way forward is to live separately. It doesn't necessarily make it easier. There's a huge amount of emotions involved, and that's what we have to grapple with as family lawyers, because we're not just advising on the law, we're also managing those emotions. So divorce is always going to be a difficult subject. It is easier now since the law changed, because at least you haven't got to pitch clients necessarily against each other if they want to get divorced quite quickly. You've got to go and base it on unreasonable behaviour or adultery, because that's always going to start you off on the wrong foot. So it is easier now, but that doesn't make the process easy, and you're still managing those same human emotions. That's never going to go away, and that's something we just have to deal with. It's about how we can manage that in the best possible way for our clients.
And while there's no blame game in the law, there is still an emotional blame game in most circumstances?
In a lot of circumstances, I think it's probably human nature, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, it's always going to be difficult, and I don't think anybody's ever going to say that it's not. It's just when it becomes unhealthy, particularly in children proceedings. As you can imagine, they're the most emotionally charged proceedings that you can be involved with, and sometimes reason goes out the window because parents become understandably fixated on the problem that they're in, and as much as it shouldn't be about winning and losing, it can become about that. So again, and I think that's where lawyers can really help people to try and manage their way through that process. But then that brings us back to, what we're talking about, the language. If you've got a really difficult children case and then language starts getting thrown in that is divisive, that's critical of the other person, which, I do see quite a lot, it really can just up the ante. And that's really where I think as lawyers, we've got to take responsibility and try and do what we can to keep a lid on it. It's not always possible, but we can try, as I've said.
I think what I'm taking away from this podcast, and we've done similar kind of discussions before. I've talked about one couple, one lawyer on another podcast, and I've talked about the work of resolution as well, and just the work in general that's going on around the family community to really challenge the historic status quo. Is that you, as a professional, as a practitioner, have only got control over what you've got control over. Now that's a very obvious statement to make, but as you said in answer to one of the previous questions, you can't control your clients, you can't control what the other side does, but you do have control over the language that you use, the way that you address people, the way that you address a situation. If what we take away from this discussion is that you do that and you set that example, that perhaps that permeates the rest of the matter.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think all of these small changes soon add up, and really the more that we can do now, then overall, I think things will improve and it will be a better place for us all to be in the family law arena.
Well, that's, I think, a really good way to end the podcast on a really positive note. Thank you so much for joining, Sally, and just sharing some of your own experiences.
Thank you very much for having me.
The Today's Family Lawyer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk. Thank you to Sally. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.